This is the examination of the hidden human condition.
You're listening to the Hidden Killers Podcast.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi.
Arie Shamuilian is with us. He's a defense attorney, and we are talking about the way that Bryan Kohlberger didn't plead the other day. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're following along, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But when it was time to say guilty or not guilty, they stood silent. And that's been the cause for much speculation about what that could possibly mean. You, as a defense attorney, I'm curious to get your insight as to what do you think that did mean?
I'm sure there's going to be some type of strategy that the defense is trying to use by him not pleading not guilty. It could potentially be that they want to use some type of incompetency defense where he's not competent to stand trial. And maybe it's a tactic for appeal. They know that he might be going down and they want to use this on appeal. But taking the totality of his arraignment, the fact that when the judge asks him, do you understand the nature of the charges against you and your maximum exposure? And he replies, yes. I don't think this tactic is going to work for incompetency, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, if Lori Vallow Daybell could not plead incompetency in Idaho, I don't think Kohlberger stands a chance with that sort of a defense. I was wondering, does it have anything to do with the fact that now they have 60 days, the state has 60 days to decide whether or not they're going to make this a capital case and put the death penalty out there? Would this in any way, shape, or form influence that or influence any sort of negotiation that may be to come if, in fact, maybe there's a pleading that goes on with this and it never actually goes to trial? Would this affect it in some way?
It technically could. The prosecution could come to Kohlberger's defense attorneys and say, hey, if he changes his plea to guilty and he admits it, we'll take the firing squad or the death penalty off the table and we'll just make this a life case. Mm-hmm. So we got to wait and see how things progress towards October 2nd, which is the target date, and see how things progress between the prosecution and the defense.
With October 2nd being the target date for a trial, but there being so much evidence to go through, especially on the part of the defense, where we're talking, of course, the big thing is the terabytes of data, which I know sounds scary, but at the end of the day, depending on what is in those terabytes of data, you have a long 24-hour footage of someone's Ring doorbell camera, which could likely be several of those in there. That's several terabytes right there of data, depending on the file size of things being saved. Is there truly, do you feel, a lot of things to go through in terms of the data here when we hear those very large numbers, or is it a little deceiving in terms of the total volume?
It's definitely deceiving. You know, as a defense attorney, I've been a part of many cases where the prosecution turns over to me 50 hours of body cam footage, video, all that stuff, only to have really 2 or 3 hours of it be truly relevant to the case. So the amount of volume of evidence that they have right now doesn't really concern me. Mm-hmm. But what is going to be concerning is the documents and the officers' reports. Mm-hmm. If you remember, there was multiple traffic stops as Mr. Kohlberger was traveling to his father's home. All those traffic stops are going to be documented, and it's going to be key in his defense to try to either do a motion to suppress or some other type of pretrial motion. And even when the defense announced ready for trial for 10/2 and they wanted to set that as a target date, the judge himself seemed pretty shocked. He says, really? 6-week trial? Okay, we'll set it.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by the defense saying only a 6-week trial?
I think when you're dealing with 1 count of burglary and 4 counts of murder, when it's a potential death penalty case, yes. I think a 6-week trial is very short, especially with the number of investigators that are going to be involved in this case. And the amount of pretrial work that's going to go into it for motions, I think 6 weeks is definitely short.
Why do you think Ann Taylor said 6 weeks and seemed fairly confident about it?
It could be a tactic, right? She could want to tell the DA and the prosecutors, look, we're ready to rock and roll. We think it's 6 minutes. You need to come to us with a reasonable offer. Otherwise, I'm reserving in my calendar for 6 weeks for me to go on this trial.
Interesting. Is it like a tactic for getting more information, or what is the tactic here?
It could be for the defense to pressure the prosecutors to turn over all discovery. Mm-hmm. Technically, the prosecution has to wait 60 days before trial, and then they could turn over whatever discovery they have. This could be turning up the fire underneath the prosecution to want to comply with the evidence turnover. And, it's a tactic. Everything that the defense is doing right now has been thought about, and it's a tactic in order to try to minimize Kohlberger's exposure to either the death penalty or life in prison.
That's interesting. I was unaware that it was a 60-day window leading up to the trial to get that sort of information. I guess I was under the understanding that as this went on, discovery was shared back and forth in its entirety, not just in that window, that very short window leading up to a trial.
It's supposed to be, right? But prosecutors always have good cause for withholding evidence to do further research, have their investigators reach out. So they have their tactics also. And believe me, in a high media exposure case such as this, the prosecutors are going to use whatever tactics they can use to hold on to as much stuff to prevent the defense from, having a full readiness for the 10-2 date.
Were you at all surprised that the supporters of Kohlberger, which there aren't many other than the love letter people that seem to write them in online, and for the most part remained fairly nameless and faceless except for a few, but no parents, no family was there in the courtroom for his arraignment the other day? I guess one would assume if you have a child that's being tried for murder and he's being arraigned, you might make the trip. That might be a call to go across the country to go see him if you're, supporting him.
It doesn't surprise me. And the reason is there's been so much media attention on this. There's going to be some security concerns for the family. Mm-hmm. So although it's nice to have family there for support, in a high profile case like this, it might be smarter to have them stay at home and watch this thing on TV as it was broadcasted live, rather than jeopardize, the public and themselves.
So it may not necessarily have been I'm not showing you support. It's more so, look, we're not going to subject ourselves to this scrutiny and this circus that's going to follow us everywhere we go if we show up there.
Yeah, and it's PR tactics. So, imagine the press, if the family was there, they're going to get bombarded with questions, and they could potentially say something that's going to jeopardize the investigation. It's better for them to just lay low right now while the defense takes control of the scenario and the press relations.
Short of any sort of exonerating evidence coming out, which there really hasn't been anything that we're aware of as of right now, what is the best strategy for Kohlberger going forward, in the interest of his defense, for trying to make him have a better image in the public eye, if that's even possible?
We're going to have to wait to see what the state turns over to the defense. I am certain of it that there's going to be exculpatory evidence that's going to tend to prove that Kohlberger didn't do this, right? The defense is going to have a hard time getting over the fact that there was a DNA hit on a knife cover that was found in the home. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they're going to get over that piece of evidence, but if there's some type of exculpatory statement or report, like let's say he was friends with the victims and that's why he was there previously, that would be an explanation for his DNA to be there. Mm-hmm. None of that has been turned over yet. And most importantly, we still don't know a motive for Kohlberger and why he did this.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
Arie Shamuilian, thank you so much for your insights. We'll talk more tomorrow about some other aspects of this case. If you like the podcast and you want to hear more, be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts. You don't miss any breaking updates or discussions in the cases that we're following for you right here. Get an ad-free experience when you sign up through Apple Podcasts right now. My name is Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.